Adam Smith was a Scottish scholar. He attended the University of Glasgow as well as Oxford, where he studied literature. He was a tutor to the young Duke of Buccleuch. While traveling with the Duke, he wrote the renowned book, The Wealth of Nations, in which he shared his insight and knowledge about economies during his lifetime.
Aspects of the book, The Wealth of Nations, made it so noteworthy.
The Wealth of Nations was kind of a description of what Adam Smith thought the economic system should be largely in Great Britain and the Western world, and it largely set the table for what we kind of today call capitalism and the free market system.
In his book, he discusses laissez-faire capitalism. Laissez-faire is a French term that means let it be or leave alone. Capitalism is an economic system in which property is owned by individuals and private owners, not by the state or government. Therefore, in laissez-faire capitalism, the government would let the businesses be or leave them alone. There were no rules or regulations for businesses to follow.
How did the idea of laissez-faire capitalism manifest itself during the Industrial Revolution?
Laissez-faire capitalism was the government's hands-off of the economy. So in other words, monopolists and these tycoons of the industrial age could get as rich and as powerful as they desired without a whole lot of government restrictions or regulations.
The corrupt businessmen, who would to some be known as robber barons, would push low wages and poor working conditions in their factory or business solely to increase their own profit.
This corruption of the business leaders led some citizens to desire a new system, one which did not have the same flaws of laissez-faire capitalism. The economic system people looked to was the complete opposite of laissez-faire capitalism. Instead of an economy without government regulations, many decided they wanted strict government regulations. They wanted regulated, equal salaries, controlled hours, and what they needed to survive. This system was called socialism. One of the most controversial philosophies that arose out of socialism was the idea of communism.
Karl Marx basically wrote the manifesto or the basis for communism or socialism. It was taken to another level, but the premise of Marxism, which was written by Karl Marx, was taken over by the communists and used. It was kind of turned around. So the purity of the Marxism was changed by communism a little bit, but it was still based off of what Karl Marx had wrote about. It still had to, basically, there had to be some kind of, there had to be some type of conflict involved in remaking the government. And I think that's what Karl Marx was saying, that there had to be conflict to make it. And then communism took that a step farther and said, you know, no classes. We don't want a class system. And then we also, there's no ownership. Everything's owned by the government. It's a community type deal.
In true communism, there is no government. Instead, people own and share the means of production. In a communist economy, all citizens are treated equally in every way. They are paid the same amount, regardless of their job or the effort needed to complete their job, and everyone is ensured the bare necessities. Communism is a utopian concept. In practice, however, it is impossible to truly accomplish due to human nature and the hunger for power. While no country has ever achieved true communism, many ended up with a form of socialism and were ruled by a strong leader.
Communism was developed by Karl Marx, a German philosopher and author of the Communist Manifesto, published in 1848 with Friedrich Engels. Marx and Engels wrote the Communist Manifesto to discuss communistic theories and to express similarities and differences between communists and other parties. It also outlined the branch of communism he designed, known as Marxism.
How did laissez-faire capitalism cause corruption to be woven throughout the economy and in business industry during the Industrial Revolution?
There was lack of regulation when it came to industry in America in the late 1800s. And since this was a laissez-faire style of governance, you had a lot of these tycoons, the industrial leaders of their day, that were able to have the opportunity for corruption. In many cases, they would form themselves into trusts or monopolies, or they would form cartels or interlocking directories. And all of these things were to achieve wealth and power, and in many cases, they were driving other competition out of their industry. And by doing that, if they didn't have to worry about competition, they could pay their workers low wages, they could charge whatever they wanted to for their products, and in many cases, they would raise those rates. They could also use their power in order to influence politicians or political decisions, which happened, and also fund campaigns of future politicians so that they would hopefully get favors in the future, and there's examples of that. There are also situations where these robber barons would use their monopolistic power in order to control markets and corner markets so that other smaller businesses could not compete.
The book is still recognized today as one of the most politically influential manuscripts. Marx also wrote several volumes about the economic causes of communism being the inevitable end to the process of evolution begun with feudalism and passing through capitalism and socialism. Marx once said, "Capitalism contained the seeds of its own destruction." Marx believed the lack of structure involved in capitalism would cause the economy to ultimately fail, destroying the nation.
You?
Yes.
Okay. Again.
How would communism decrease innovation?
Communism would probably decrease innovation because of the lack of initiative, because everything is owned by the state. There's no incentive to really work harder because there's not supposed to be any separation of classes, so there's really no incentive to work harder, if that makes any sense.
Communism did not incentivize innovation because everyone receives the same amount of pay and benefits despite the work ethic needed for their job. For example, a janitor gets paid the same amount as a doctor, even though a doctor works much harder, has more training, and is specialized. Capitalism, however, rewards innovation and hard work. This gives an incentive to create new and improved products, thus creating more inventions.